We'll hear today from 4 panels comprised of leaders in the choral field and related fields. The primary question they'll examine is, if we believe that group singing has the power to change lives for the better, how do we harness this power in an intentional way in our day-to-day work? Each panel will explore this question from a different angle, exploring the human impact of singing, what happens in rehearsal and performance, expanding our reach, and crafting performance. Joining me to introduce the members of our first panel, exploring the human impact of singing, is Stephanie Tubiolo, a graduate student in our choral conducting program at Yale, who as research fellow has also been helping with the organization of today's symposium, as well as this week's Conducting 21 masterclass. So welcome, and I'll turn things over to Stephanie.
Andre de Quadros is music director and conductor of the Manado State University Choir of Indonesia and the artistic director of Conducting 21C. He is also a professor of music at Boston University and holds affiliate faculty positions in the African Studies Center, Center for the Study of Asia, Institute for the Study of Muslim Societies and Civilizations, and the Prison Education Program at Boston University. Julianne Paralisi is a music therapist, pioneer, and passionate choral singer. She is the founder of Music Therapy Without Borders, an organization that specializes in leading international service projects around the globe, bringing music therapy services to locations that would not otherwise have access to them, thus expanding the reach of the field while offering opportunities for students and professionals to broaden their multicultural competency. Marguerite Brooks joined the Yale faculty in 1985 as chair of the choral conducting program at the School of Music and director of choral music at the Institute of Sacred Music. She has served on the faculties of Smith and Amherst colleges and was director of choral music at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. Dr. Stephen Demarest is a professor of music education at Northwestern University, where he teaches graduate and undergraduate courses in choral music methods, music cognition, research methods, and philosophy. His research interests include the cognitive, neurological, and social foundations of inaccurate singing, the cultural neuroscience of music, and sight singing pedagogy.
Good morning. As Stephanie said, I'm Julianne, and I'm a board-certified music therapist. So I am privileged every single day to witness personal transformations that come about by using music in intentional and clinical ways with people of all ages and abilities. It is my personal mission and passion in life to help people experience connection, growth, transformation, and joy, all through engaging in the creative and expressive arts. This morning, we thought we'd kick off the day by enjoying a little creative musical experience together to get our minds and bodies woken up and ready to go, ready to listen. So, you ready? I would like to invite you to stand up. Okay, I'm going to split the room up into a couple chunks. Let's see. There to maybe here-ish. That's group 1. And we've got here to maybe there-ish. Group 2. And then here to the end, group 3. Can I see group 1? Good. Group 2? Sweet.
Oh, sorry.
You want me to go ahead? Is it possible for us to get the lights on? Oh, great. Okay, great. Don't they look happy? My charge today, in the next 12 minutes, is to quickly review some of the research on singing and well-being and what it really tells us and doesn't tell us about what's going on. Obviously, we're here today in part because our belief in the power of singing, and also I think for all of us, the personal experience of how singing changed our lives. What we might want to remember is that we're maybe not typical. In many ways, I understand, I heard the laughter, but national surveys suggest that 34% of adolescents continue in music past elementary school, and of those 34%, 17% of them, which, yay for us, is the largest percent, continue in singing. That number goes down as they reach high school graduation. So if we want to make claims about what engaging in singing does for everybody, then we have to take a scientific approach to studying it, and we have to look at people who aren't already committed to singing as a life choice. And that's the framework for my talk today. My own work is in inaccurate singing and helping both children and adults who have difficulty matching pitch, and also looking at some of the psychological and social consequences of being labeled a poor singer. So that's kind of my context that I'm coming to this from, but more recently, just in this last year, I've gotten engaged in studies looking at the effects of singing with aphasic patients and also Alzheimer's patients, and those two studies are starting next year. So I'm getting up to speed in this literature and want to share that with you. So when we think of singing and well-being, this is mostly what we see. Choir singing may be good for your heart. Choir singing improves health and work environment, and Time magazine, like a drug advertisement, group singing has been scientifically proven to lower stress, relieve anxiety, and elevate endorphins by now. Okay? So having recently experienced a study of mine getting published and then going through the media reinterpretation process, I'm sympathetic to the authors of these studies that their work is being presented perhaps a little bit too over the top with results, but that's what you need in a headline. When I see a headline like this, what I ask myself are two things. One, okay, I want to read this study. That's the first question I ask. And secondly, what was their methodology? And research in this area has used three main methodologies. The first,
qualitative investigation. This is dealing with in-depth study of a small group or sometimes even one or two individuals and their experience with singing. Surveys and questionnaires, these are done as self-report measures, how much people like singing and what they perceive their quality of life to be. So it's people telling you about their life experience, but in a little bit more systematic and large sample way. And finally, experimental. And for those of us engaged in the research process, the benefit of an experimental approach, if you want to say that group singing causes X, whatever X might be, you really have to be engaged in experimental research. That's really the only way to demonstrate that on any kind of scale. So I'm going to go through quickly these three types of research and what we know. I'm just going to do a sampling of studies, and you have some of them in your bibliography. Qualitative investigations, I'm going to focus on two that were done by Bailey and Davidson, looking at participants in a homeless choir. And they only sampled a small group of the participants from these choirs. The participants reported that singing reduced depression and created a positive emotional experience, that it actually helped them relax, but also created energy. They felt more energetic after participating in the choir. And perhaps most importantly for this population, increased their mental focus, got their mind off of their problems a little bit, and increased their sense of self-worth, particularly the performance aspect of it. The important thing to remember about this kind of research is the goal of this research is not to generalize beyond the people that were studied. So we cannot say from this research that all homeless people will benefit from singing in a choir, for example. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. It doesn't mean the research isn't important and gives us some insights into what might be possible benefits of singing for these populations. But this research itself can't go beyond who they studied. The next area, surveys and questionnaires. I picked two really nice surveys. One is Clifton Hancock's large study with choirs from 3 different countries. They asked them to report on how much they enjoyed singing, what a benefit they thought it was, and also take the World Health Organization brief questionnaire on psychological well-being, which is a great measure. It's one of the few measures we have that kind of tries to standardize the notion of well-being in a way that we can have some confidence in what people say. They found that there was a small correlation between singing and psychological well-being only for the women in their sample, which were the majority of their sample, not for the men. They did, however, have some qualitative findings from the long answer portion that were more positive, particularly a weird group, people who scored low on the psychological well-being, but high on the singing enjoyment, which kind of goes against their correlation. But actually, for those people, singing was, to them, seen as more important in helping them deal with what they were going through. Johnson's study was with 117 older community choir members in Finland, where they have a lot of senior activities. They reported greater benefits of choir singing. They had higher quality of life. They also used the World Health Organization questionnaire, had higher quality of life, both in the psychological and I think really importantly for this population, the social area of the questionnaire. They also reported fewer symptoms of depression and greater satisfaction with their health. Now, one of the limitations here, and we'll get to this in a minute, is they only surveyed people who had chosen, both of these studies, people who had chosen singing as an activity. So it's kind of important just to remember based on what I said at the beginning. Finally, I want to spend a little time with experimental. We've read a lot of interpretation about, particularly the first group, physiological changes. The big three for physiological changes, cortisol, immunoglobulin A, and oxytocin. Need I say more? Probably. Cortisol is connected with stress. So low cortisol, good. High cortisol, bad. And what this research found, some of it, they've had real difficulty replicating the findings of this research, which is always an issue with experimental research. But what they found in general, cortisol tends to go down for amateur singers participating in a singing activity, goes up for everybody in a performance, which is good. We want them to be, right, a little bit more on top of things. But it does go down for amateur singers in rehearsal, not for professional singers. They're working, after all. Right? Immunoglobulin A is an immune system response as measured through the saliva, and if it goes up, it's good. It means your immune system's working better. 2 studies found increases after singing, so that's good. And oxytocin is a kind of a feel-good bonding hormone, and the grape study found that oxytocin increased in both amateur and professional singers, but more so for the amateurs, and the professionals did not report feeling better. They just had an actual physical change. So going quickly, the next three groups of studies, what I like about the next three groups is at least one of the studies in these groups used a control condition, which is really important in experimental research. There's two things in experimental research: random assignment and an equivalent or some sort of control condition. And all three of these studies use that. The Cohen randomly assigned seniors to either a singing group or a typical senior activity, found greater overall health, fewer doctor visits, less medication use, fewer falls, less loneliness, better morale, and more activities for the music group. So that's good. That's really good. And they were randomly assigned to singing versus the other activities. Bonilla did pulmonary benefits of a group of patients who had pulmonary distress and found strong benefits for singing. The Fu study, this is a student, a PhD student in nursing at Washington that I supervised. I was part of her dissertation. She actually did a pilot study with seniors in regular assisted living and or independent living, 3 groups. She found pulmonary benefits for a group singing activity and cognitive benefits. They were better at word fluency, the group that participated in singing. So there's some real potential, I think, in both of these studies suggests real potential working with seniors and singing. I wanted to throw these in because it's important for us to realize that these don't often get press. Davidson did a really nice study with seniors and found no difference in any of the things they were predicting with singing. And it's important to realize that. And Valentine and Evans found that solo singing and group singing improved their positive attitude and that sort of thing, but they found that swimming was better than both. I know, so I'm just saying, okay? I don't mean to be Debbie Downer here, but I'm just trying to give us a picture of what's going on. So some of the limitations of these studies that we need to keep in mind: one, selection. A lot of the studies measure people who've already selected to be in choir. So it's like asking somebody, do you enjoy this activity that you've chosen to spend extra time doing? We might get the answer yes in a lot of cases for that. A lack of comparison to non-singers. In some of the survey studies, it would be nice to have matched group of people who are similar in age, lifestyle, etc., but don't sing, to find out if the quality of life is really different. I suspect it might be, but we need to know. Methods, lots of self-report. So some of that's necessary, like quality of life. With most people, you have to ask them. But it's important to try to get a better sense of changes that people might not be aware of. Lack of randomization, we talked about that, and lack of meaningful control. So the gold standard for a clinical trial is a randomized control trial where the control condition has a lot of the features of the experimental condition but not the crucial feature. And we're in the infancy of doing that kind of research, but I think the potential is there, and I think that's where we're headed. We're seeing an uptick in experimental work, and I think that's going to be positive for us in terms of really learning what's going on. So in summary, choir members believe that singing contributes to their well-being. And those who like choir, that is, those who believe in those positive benefits, report a higher quality of life. So it's working for them really, really well. The physical evidence for benefits is weak, that is, hormone changes and things like that, but always positive. Okay? So we haven't found negative effects of singing for physiological measures, which I think is really important. And the physiological benefits are strongest for older singers. This next area, I think, is the most potential we have with older adults. Potential to reduce depression, increase sociability and quality of life in older adults, as well as, I would say, these pulmonary and cognitive benefits that our nursing student found. So I hope we see a lot more research in this area because I think there's a lot of potential there. And the older population, and I know this because I'm one of them, is the fastest growing population in the United States. So if we can improve the quality of life for older Americans, I think that would be really important. And just one quick note, we should expand our definition of group singing, us, we choral directors, right? Because singing in a high-stakes choir where the director is mad at you if you don't do it right is maybe not the kind of positive benefit that we're seeing from some of these others. So providing opportunities for casual group singing and more inclusive group singing, I think, is a direction we want to think about. And I think you'll hear some of that from our other panelists today. Thanks.
setting up. Also, I think this is I'm setting up Julianne and Andre, I hope. And there's so much to learn from science. Were you reading yesterday about the...
You're not hearing very well.
Check, check. How about this one?
Is this better? Okay. Let's see how my glasses work. Speaking into the microphone. Were you reading yesterday about the space probe that landed on a comet and then went to sleep? And scientists didn't know what was happening, but then it woke up and it's now transmitting data from that comet. Science is incredible. And we look forward, I think, to finding out what science says about what we all can talk about anecdotally. The singing we did in the beginning was incredible too. And let's think about how it differs from what we do in other sings at other organizations. We all enjoy those sings at ACDA and wherever we are, but this was different. There was no music. Well, there was music, but we weren't holding it, were we? There were no printed words, and we basically improvised along with Julianne. There was no accompanying instrument, just the sound of our voices. And when we put our individual voices together, we made a beautiful, expressive, and powerful noise. We were reminded that everybody can sing. Julianne gave us voice. We each found our own voice, even at 9 o'clock in the morning. And together, we claimed our collective voice. Julianne's song became our song today, and it can never be replicated again exactly as it sounded a little while ago. It was ours in that particular moment in time. What a gift live music is. Perhaps Julianne feels like the Weavers. I don't know if you do, or even if you know who the Weavers are. I'm an old broad who wrote in an introduction to one of their songbooks, we do not feel that our songs are truly ours until they become yours. A song means very little until you have given it life through your own voice and shaped it to your own feeling and singing style. You're probably further along in your summer reading than I, though I remind us all that summer does not officially begin until next week. The books on top of my desk are Delia Ephron, Sister, Mother, Husband, Dog, a collection of essays, Eliza Griswold, I Am the Beggar of the World, it's poetry of Afghan women, Richard Powers, The Time of Our Singing, a novel, Susan Cain, Quiet, talking about introversion, extroversion, and personality traits. Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind, talking about decision-making. Karen Armstrong, Fields of Blood, The Relationship of Religion and War. And finally, Alex Ross's Listen to This, a collection of essays. And this is, I'm embarrassed to say, left over from a couple of years ago. I mention these, and especially Alex Ross's book, to let you in on what I've been thinking about vis-a-vis this conference and what many of us do in our day jobs during the academic year. How we came to be conductors in the first place. Singing, relationships, politics, war and peace, those with limited or no voice, musical variety, and the ghettoization and sacralization of different kinds of music. Take a minute sometime during today and think about your musical journey. Alex Ross describes his. In the simplified version, it's Beethoven Eroica, Mahler 8, jazz, punk, post-punk bands, and then back to Beethoven. My journey includes my mother taking me to hear Benny Goodman and Teddy Wilson and singing show tunes around the piano. My grandmother, an amateur pianist, played Brahms and Scott Joplin. And it's possible that I'm one of the only people in the room today who has heard the Beatles live. I sang the Fauré and Brahms requiems in high school and therefore rebelled in college by singing in and being pitched for an a cappella group. My a cappella identity was such that one of my classmates in a conducting class was condescendingly surprised that I could sing the Brahms from memory, including the instrumental parts. So was I a classical or a pop folk musician? I wanted it all. But the two worlds were seemingly light years apart, and to inhabit both was apparently neither acceptable nor possible because each group was so dismissive of the other. Why wasn't it possible to have a musical life in both? Was the Brahms Requiem really better than all of the Beatles, or just different? Both voices spoke to me, to my brain, and to my heart. But where was my voice? Where was the synthesis of these two seemingly antithetical worlds? My dilemma seems minor when compared with the collision of other worlds in other lives. I think particularly of religious and cultural borders which cross differing ethnic traditions, and ensembles which address these tensions. We have one at this festival, which you will hear later this week. I speak now, though, of the Interfaith Pontanima Choir, Spiritual Bridge, from Sarajevo, Bosnia-Herzegovina. Formed to include Jews, Christians, and Muslims, they have tried to, in their words, transcend aggression, imperialism, and nationalism of the traditional religions of ethnic nations, and to enter into the heart of the prayers of these faiths to sing and bear witness to messages of trust, cooperation, and peace. When heard live, the voice of this chorus elicits a powerful reaction from the audience, which originates as much in the commitment of the singers as in the quality of their performance. Don Saliers has said this: whatever people can say with passion, and Julianne used the word passion, or Stephanie did it in her description of Julianne. Whatever people can say with passion and in heightened speech, they will end up singing in some form. When life is deeply felt, music gives shape and voice to the very pattern of our experienced world. So the act of singing together of life lived and felt binds heart and mind with ordered sound. I wish I had written that. We can all, I hope, remember rehearsals and concerts in which performers and audience members reacted strongly. I hope I never forget the audience that laughed, because it should laugh, at the extended rolled R, in the paired setting of the genealogy of Jesus, was the son of. The high school student who, after rehearsing Sing Me to Heaven, told me that her grandmother had just died and that she and her family sang to her during her last days. The couple in the front row who were quietly weeping during a performance of the barber Anthony O'Daly. The flutist with a peaceful, beautiful smile on her face as she listened to the chorus rehearsed part of the Dona Nobis Pacem from the B minor Mass. The men from the shelter who sang along during Moses Hogan's We Shall Walk Through the Valley in Peace. The singers reading through for the first time through their tears both The Last Letter Home, whose text is a letter written to his family by a soldier who died in combat, and Annalise with texts of Anne Frank. the clarinetist who said that Annalise was one of the most transformative musical experiences he had ever had, the violinist who told us that the Jackson Passion was the most meaningful music she played during all of Holy Week, watching tearful chorus members during a performance of the dirge for two veterans of Vaughan Williams' Dona Nobis Pacem. I think about the multiplicity of voices at work in these instances, the original texts, the librettists, the composers, the singers, the players. These were without a doubt strong voices. And then I think about the reception of those voices by ears that listened and heard. Who gave what to whom? But what about those voices that are not so strong, those with limited or no voice? We can list many groups. Historically, think about slaves, struggling ethnic groups. Think about the Estonian song festivals with 300,000 singers, the labor movement, women, anti-war, pro-peace, African Americans. All of these groups have songs. And in the present, Black lives, those with physical and emotional challenges, the prison population, the homeless, children, the aged. What responsibility do we have to empower these people to find and claim a voice, to have songs? If categorizing people is an instrument of power, then it is incumbent on us, those who have done the categorization and still do, to ensure a voice for all. I am involved with Joyful Noise, a chorus found in 2000 by Allison and Beth Fromm. Its singers have physical and neurological challenges and acquired brain injuries. The singer and their friends explain their vision, and you can read about that on their website. But it talks about the skills they develop, that they share their joy through public performance. Allison is particularly adamant about the performance aspect, stressing both the preparation for the performance as well as the concert itself. All of the singers, she says, are used to being stared at. But the stare is transformed into a look of admiration and respect during and after a performance. Two of the singers say this: "It makes me feel famous and proud. I feel confident. I was comfortable. My favorite part was the singing. I went up there and conquered my fear." I am a conductor. The individuals in choruses I direct could each sing by him or herself. Having found and claimed a voice, each could go it alone, but has chosen to sing with others. That we as an ensemble perform music that has variety, is beautifully and powerfully sung, and goes well, I hope. This goes without saying. But today, when it is so easy to isolate ourselves from one another, singers and choruses want more, and so do I. We want to have a sense of emotional connection with each other and with an audience, and we want to make a positive difference in our world. This means we need to reevaluate everything from repertoire to how that repertoire is presented. What do we wear? Where do we perform? When do we perform? To capitalize on the fact that composers today are not constricted by false genre boundaries, and to combat the sort of musical snobbery that privileges one type of music or one type of performer over another. A few Sundays ago, we celebrated that high holy day in the UCC, Children's Sunday. One of our congregation, young enough to know better, said she wasn't going to attend because she feared the music in the service would resemble an elementary school recital. She did show up, of course, and raved about how wonderful it was, that it was so spiritual. Of course, the kids played well, but I placed the kids' offerings strategically so that each piece, including pogo stick, worked within the liturgy, allowing each child's voice to be heard. Samantha Power, the United States ambassador to the UN, said the following at Barnard this spring: "It is not enough to find our own voices. True equality also requires that we learn to hear and to lift up the voices of those whom others choose not to hear. To paraphrase Pete Seeger, songs are seeds, let them be scattered widely.
I can think of no better way to set me up than Stephen's work, Julianne's, and Maggie's. So I guess you can see that picture, right? So I started to ask myself the question, because we always talk about what we do, where we go, what we sing. But I wanted to ask myself the question about who and how we exclude. What don't we do, in other words? So I started to ask myself about questions to do with exclusion. In other words, who do we exclude? So where do we not perform? What kinds of formats of performance do we not embrace? Stage, concert formalities, just like Maggie was talking about. Whose music is not represented? In other words, whose music is privileged? Who is not singing? Who has no access to singing? And then I started to make a list. And the list is obvious there. You can look at that list and you can see. And the only group that's not on there, the temporarily able, which is us, essentially. But yes, we're all only temporarily able, because you know what's going to happen to us next, right? And if you look at that long list, we really, really are forgetting about a lot of people. And if you think about 13.4 to 16.5 million American children live in poverty, are they being included? And so I really wanted to talk about today the forgotten world, because I think choral music has forgotten, by and large, relatively speaking, a large chunk of the American population. And I wanted to focus specifically on one aspect, on one component of a large population of people who are incarcerated. And just in case you don't know, and you might need reminding how dismal the situation is, with 5% of the world's population, we have 25% of the world's prisoners. 1 in 3 African American males in that age group are in some form of criminal justice supervision. And the number of American women in prison has increased by 646%. It's not because American women are worse than women anywhere else, but it's because we have. I went through that last night very quickly because my colleague is going to show that to you later on. African Americans now serve virtually as much time in prison for a non-violent offense as whites do for a violent offense. Think about that. So what we have is, if you read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness, and the rich get richer and the poor get prison, America is waging a concerted war against the poor and the black. And as Joshua Dubler says, and it's arguable, of course, but he makes a statement that we have a prodigious system of torture in our prisons. And alarmingly, 250,000 youth are being tried and sentenced or incarcerated every year. On any given night, 10,000 children are being held in adult prisons and jails in this country. And you know what that means for children to be in adult facilities. And so I asked myself the question, what does choral music have to offer the forgotten world? Sorry, I'm going to my next because it was a bit of a... So I've been working in these two... sorry, here, just go back. What am I doing here? So I should have been at the front of this, but I'm not. Okay, so I've been working in these two, trying to make a small piece of work in two Boston prisons. This is the Norfolk men's prison. This is the Framingham women's prison. This is also the Framingham women's prison. The first, the men's Norfolk prison is where there are 1,500 men, 700 of whom are there for life, and the Framingham prison is the only women's prison in Boston, which, by the way, was originally started for the simple-minded, the feeble-minded, the indigent, the homeless, women, or for very often for mistresses of rich men who went to prison for being pregnant. And we have started an approach in the prisons called empowering song, and the empowering song approach is an approach that my colleagues Emily Howe, who's presenting later on today, and Jamie Hillman and I have developed as an approach, really reflecting on some of the work that Maggie was talking about empowering people. We talk about song as a channel to poetry and to song creation. I'm going to give you one simple example of one story that we had. We had a young woman in this women's prison. Emily Howe and I were working together one session, and we sang this song without music. We sang "Do Lord, oh do Lord." You know the song. Sing with me. Do Lord, oh do remember me. Do Lord, oh do remember me. Do Lord, oh do remember me. Way beyond the blue. You sing beautifully. So at the end of that song, we asked the women, so what might the blue mean? And they said, well, the blue might mean the ocean, death, suffering, redemption, salvation, and the ocean, and so on. And so we asked them to write, and one of the women wrote this. I'll read it out to you. Minutes now feel like eternity. Always you are out of grasp. Always you are out of reach, beyond my grasp, swallowed whole. So far beyond the blue. How quickly sorrow comes to song, and it drags the meaning forth from everything. And I die to say I missed you. I lay it bare to say I cared, but my heart still wears its wanting way beyond the blue. This is another example of a young man's work. I'm going to introduce it before I speak about it. We had a group of men together, and once again talking about how song is a channel to poetry, and then poetry back into song, because we sang those poems back. And in this group of men, they were doing an improvised piece at the end of the semester, and this young man had been relatively quiet for the whole semester, shy, I would say. And then when he stood up in this improvisation, and he rapped this poem, and I'm going to read it out to you. He says, "How can one stare deeply into my eyes and don't see innocence, my adolescence, taken away from me in handcuffs because of one misstep in my misguided life? Misread, misjudged, and misunderstood by the blinded, but never nearly once in my adolescence had anyone listened or let me explain my misbehavior to an adult in order to comprehend an adolescence's mind as to why a child could commit a crime. Because of one mistake, I'm misled and misrepresented by dominions playing the double standard of the law, which my family, my future, and my faith are fading away slowly like dark clouds, covering the sunny sky, and my smiles turn into frowns, frightening and fighting off a dark shadow that isn't mine. Listen to my own tears pouring and pounding off the concrete floor, ripping my heart out for attention in order for anyone to hear my cries beyond these barbed wires, white walls, screaming for someone to help, save my adolescence behind these cell doors. I'm just a child misplaced in a machine without mercy. and I'm missing my mother warmth, who nurtured me to become somebody, the future of today's society, yet my adolescence gone. And when he finished rapping this poem in this group improvisation piece, we were all stunned, really. No one could speak. And then he said, "That's the first time in my life that anybody had stopped and listened to me." And I thought about how powerful that was, that a moment had happened that through music, a young man who obviously hadn't had the ear of his family, society, had found a moment to be heard in the context of our work. And so we think about our work as a channel to the self, to the group, to the art form, to the other arts, poetry, visual arts, narrative, journaling, theater, and so on. Here's another story. This is a young man. Well, he's not a young man anymore. He's 53. He was sentenced as a child to die in prison. And as America was one of the 2 countries in the world which hasn't ratified the International Convention on the Rights of the Child, and America was allowed to sentence children to die in prison until 2012, when the Supreme Court in Alabama versus Miller overturned that so it's unconstitutional now to sentence children to die in prison. And he was up for parole, and he's now, we're happy to say, in pre-release after 35 or so years in prison. And he did this wonderful piece of art. And in the Norfolk prison, they don't really have access to paint. They very often dissolve M&Ms to make paint, and they cut their hair, if they've got hair, to make paintbrushes and so on. I'm not sure how he did this, but on that wall you see the names of all the people who are condemned to life, to die in prison, and the people who have actually died in prison. And so he did this painting, and he said at the end, "I have never drawn, I have never created anything artistic." And when he went to the parole board, he said that one of the most powerful things that changed his life when he was in prison was the experience of music. This is, and you can't see it very well, unfortunately, but you can see the musical keyboard. I'm going to read out to you one last, because I'm out of time, but at the end we will take some questions, and I would just want to, these 2 small extracts by one particular man, and he says that men who so often have not been properly socialized or initiated into manhood in constructive ways, through your examples and the authenticity of love which you bring with you, many of us gained confidence, which allowed us to shatter many illusions and increased our ability to seek and attain truth together. Truth that all remain equal and loved. No one is discarded, tossed away, forgotten. And the same man who spoke about a moment of vulnerability in the music session, he wrote, "I love music. It has become my bridge to the world. A child given up at birth, sexually abused from the age of 6 to 8, dealing with many abandonment and trust issues, fighting to survive and keep the music within alive. A professor's consoling hug to a wounded child of 52. Inclusion. I'm not allowed to hug in the prison, but I do. We'll be happy to take questions at the end after all our sessions presentations are over. Thank you all very much. So I just want to say my closing comment is that I want to resonate with what's been said earlier, that we have an obligation. We have this wonderful thing called choral music, and there are extraordinary things happening. There are models for excellence. There are models for transforming the world within choral music. We have to use choral music not to protect and prop up the status quo. We have to use choral music, this wonderful thing called choral music, as an instrument of change, to harness ourselves in the service of a better world. Thank you very much.
my last slide, so you get a little sneak preview now. There we go. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a board-certified music therapist, which means that I get to do all of these things that everyone on the panel has been talking about every day. I use music in these intentional clinical ways to help transform lives and change lives. I'm going to give you the official definition of music therapy because I've learned in my travels that not everybody really has any idea what that is. So here we go. What is a music therapist? A music therapist is a credentialed professional who is trained in the clinical use of music interventions to accomplish individualized goals within a therapeutic relationship. So the key piece of that is individualized goals. Music therapy is not a prescriptive program. There's no one-size-fits-all. Sometimes people ask me, so what music do you use to treat ADHD or autism? The answer is there is no music that I can use to treat ADHD or autism. It all depends. There are as many different musical interventions as there are humans on the planet. Each session that we do is tailored specifically to each individual based on his or her needs, their musical preferences, their goals, and we establish these goals by doing an assessment and by working with other members of their treatment team. So very individualized. And music therapy, by the book, is an evidence-based healthcare profession that uses music to address a variety of goals, including cognitive, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual needs of individuals across the lifespan. So some of the things that you've been hearing the other people talk about today that we want to try to encourage all of these goals. Interestingly, I'm finding in my work in other places in the world, I'm having to sort of think about these definitions and how they really relate out in other cultures and other countries, how I can be flexible and adapt these definitions to the people that I'm working with. So that's a work in progress at the moment. So additionally, about music therapy, because of the power of music that, as you all know and have experienced, we can often reach those individuals that maybe other more traditional therapies are not able to help. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples throughout my presentation, but one that has been very well documented is the example of Alzheimer's disease. You may have heard this in some popular research, but it has been well documented that individuals with Alzheimer's disease who have forgotten their friends and their family members who don't know their own name, they can actually still sing familiar songs from their childhood. So it's one of the last things to go. And why is that? Well, there's a couple reasons. One of them is that music is actually, there we go. Music is what we call a whole brain experience. So it activates a lot of different areas of the brain when we're singing or engaging in music making. And as Dr. Oliver Sacks said, nothing activates the brain so extensively as music. And he's a professor of neurology at Columbia, and he's written a number of books, including Musicophilia. There's a lot of really, really interesting brain research going on right now. We heard a little bit about it earlier. But through fMRI imaging, scientists have been able to map some of the brain's many functions to specific regions. And what they're finding is that music actually lights up many areas across both hemispheres of the brain, including oral areas, visual, motor, coordination areas, language areas. It's kind of lighting up a whole lot in there, as well as areas that are involved with memory and emotion. So what this means is that if one area of the brain is compromised or damaged in some way, there are still many other points of access when using music because it is such a whole brain experience. And music can actually end up helping to stimulate the brain to even create new neural pathways and connections. So there's really, really exciting stuff going on right now in the field of neurology and studying this. For example, I want to share a couple of case studies from my own work, which is in the Cayman Islands. I started the first music therapy practice in the Cayman Islands. So the next couple of examples I'm going to give you are from my work there. So we currently have a patient who I'll call Mr. A, and he suffered multiple severe strokes. And he was diagnosed with aphasia, which is essentially the inability to speak because of damage to the language areas of the brain. When we first met Mr. A, the only thing that he was able to say at all was, ya, 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 ya. That was all that he could say. He had been working with a speech therapist for a while, and she was unable to elicit any further language from him. So he was referred to us, as often happens when people don't know what to do with anyone. They send him to the music therapist to see what we could do. So we came in and we started using some music therapy singing techniques. And by the end of the very first session, this man, even though he was unable to speak, he could still manage to complete the ends, the final word of familiar songs with the proper word and the proper timing. So he could not say anything but ya, but he would fill in, Jesus loves me, this I know. And then by the next session, Mr. A was singing short musical phrases along with us, and we were playing the guitar and singing with him. We continued working with him, and in time, he was not only able to sing longer and longer phrases, but his brain began to pave new pathways around the damaged areas, and he was able to transfer this singing ability into actual speech. And he can now communicate in full sentences. In fact, not perfectly, but the other day he grabbed my hands and looked into my eyes and he said to me, "Thank you for teaching me. You do good work." Which was an amazingly powerful moment for me, and singing, transforming lives. There are other well-known examples of this too. You may be familiar with Gabrielle Giffords, a congresswoman who was shot in the head. There's a link in the handout that we gave you to some videos about her using music therapy to help regain her speech ability. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can check out that video. Another example, kind of going along a similar path as Andre was talking about, singing as a lifeline, as a connection, and in this case, the singing was rapping. So another example of music reaching even those individuals that traditional therapies might not be able to help, one of my favorite groups to work with is teenagers. And as you may have experienced in your own lives, if you're parents or if you know any teenagers are sometimes not the easiest to talk to. And though they are going through very difficult and confusing times, and they really need to connect and express themselves. So what I've found in my work is that music, and in particular singing or rapping, can often be one of the only ways to reach these kids and help them express themselves and get the support that they so desperately need. So one of the schools that I work in is a really tough school. There are gangs, drugs, weapons, a lot of truancy, you name it. This school has some tough kids in it. And as happens, we were given a group of boys to work with who are the toughest guys in the school who nobody else knew what to do with. So what did we do? We started singing. We started rapping. We connected with them where they were and engaged with them through rap. And these boys, some of whom are actual gang members, some of whom who have been rejected by their own parents, all of whom rebel in school, are now coming to our music therapy group religiously, which, by the way, is on a Friday afternoon in the last period of the day, which is not the most focused time. They come every week on Friday afternoon and sometimes staying till after the bell rings. It's because they're so engaged in writing songs, in rapping together and sharing their hopes, their dreams, the reality of their daily lives with each other and with us. So another example, singing, transforming lives every day. My final example that I would like to share with you is a group that is very close to my heart. And this taps into a little bit what Maggie was saying. I first met these amazing individuals 5 years ago, 5 years ago this week actually, and they touched me profoundly with their enthusiasm, their joy, and their excitement about singing with me and singing together. These lovely singers that I'm going to talk about attend a day program for individuals with disabilities, and they all have special needs or disabilities of some kind, from those who are severely multiply disabled and impaired and nonverbal to those who just have mild challenges cognitively or otherwise. To set the stage a little bit, in the Caribbean, we are a little bit behind in terms of services for and even recognition of people with disabilities. We are getting there. We have a disabilities policy that's going through government at the moment. And it actually was not that long ago that individuals with disabilities were actually hidden away in homes due to the shame on the family, and not to mention the lack of services. So this day program is actually tucked up way in a remote corner of the island where people don't ever visit them or see them, and these individuals have historically had little or no voice in the community. So it has been one of my missions to empower them to find their own voices and to find their place in the community through singing. So I would like to play a short clip for you. I started this chorus in 2010, so 5 years ago. And though at the beginning it was very hard for them to maintain focus and attention to even sit in the room for the whole rehearsal, they were very excited and very determined to succeed. They have since performed a Christmas and a spring concert every year. They love every minute of their chance to shine on the stage, and they talk about their concerts for months before and after. And the changes that I have seen in them individually and as a group are tremendous. I'm also proud to report that because of this chorus, these individuals have been featured in the paper, on local television, they've been interviewed by reporters, and they've even had the top leaders of the country, including multiple ministers, attend their concerts. Talk about giving them a voice. So this is one of the best examples that I personally know of the power of singing to transform lives. And before I play it, I will let you know that the goals of this group are, at this point, to maybe sing approximately the same words at approximately the same time. So we are not going for choral perfection here. We're going for inclusion and giving people a chance to experience singing together. So with that in mind, I present to you the Sunrise Chorus. With that in mind, I present you the Sunrise Chorus. Very excited to know that they got to sing at Yale University, so I will pass that to them. Thank you.
We have 6 or 7 minutes for questions, comments, interrogations, disagreements. There are microphones in both aisles, so please feel free to walk to a microphone and... Yes, Francisco. Well, we can't even take a click pen inside. So no, we have in both the men's and the women's prisons we have an electric keyboard that it's a relatively kind of museum pieces, but they're there. There are no other instruments that we use. Essentially, we work with the voice and the body. Since there are no auditions to be, apart from being part of our university's program, since there are no auditions to join the class, we also have issues to do with pitch matching, accuracy of singing. We have people who can sing very well, and we have people for whom singing is a first experience, and that's also profoundly beautiful to have people who've never had a chance to sing, to find, as Maggie says, to find voice, to find their voices, and to find voice. Jean-Baptiste?
Andre, can you tell us about the experience that you read Jeff in Indonesia where the guardians sit with prisoners?
Okay, I'm only standing here as the chair of the panel, so please don't feel you have to direct questions to me. But the question was, Jean-Baptiste Bertrand asked if I could say something about the prison choir in Indonesia with which I worked last summer. It was unprecedented that a choir flew from one part of the country to the other. I have a festival in Bali that I direct, and so a prison choir came from the island of Papua to Bali, and they arrived. It was actually quite strange. Emily and I were there. Emily Howe and I were there in Bali. We were waiting for them. We got a phone call to say that the prison choir was waiting for us, and they'd arrived, and we went to the prison, and we said. Are they men or women? And the person didn't know, and we thought we dressed. Emily wasn't sure what to dress because here when you go to prison you really have to be careful. No cleavage, no skin, the kind of thing that you have to dress very appropriately when you go to. So Emily wore some of my clothes. Where's Emily? Where's Emily? Emily disgraced herself by wearing my clothes and wearing my sneakers and so on. We drove to the prison. And when we got out in the parking lot, there was a group of people out there, and we said, "Well, who are they?" And these were outside the prison in the parking lot were the prison choir. So, I mean, we were staggered. We said, and then it turned out that there were men and there were women, and they seemed to be just a homogeneous group, and there seemed to be a couple of kids there too. We said, well. Who are the prisoners? Yes, the men are the prisoners and the women are the prisoners. And they said, well, there seems to be no staff. Well, yes, the staff are there. Well, and who's the staff? Well, the staff and the prisoners were indistinguishable because they were all wearing similar kinds of clothing. And there were a couple of kids there who were a couple of kids of staff members. And so it began a few days of this really quite extraordinary experience of working with these prisoners who are both Muslims and Christians from this island of Papua. And they were working with us in the campus of the Arts Center. And I remember having to say to them, I said to them once, "Why don't you escape?" I said, I have to ask you that question because when I go back to Boston and tell my prison men and women, I'm going to tell them that I asked you, why don't you escape? Just escape, God damn it. And they said, and I know Emily was there at the time, and they said, escape where? To what? What would we do? And I said, but I said you could escape, but we've got our families there, and they come and visit us, and so it was a profound experience of understanding incarceration, humanity, community in a completely different setting. And here we were. We did some musical work, and they did a performance with us together. And they had spears, and they were dancing with spears. And I just thought it's fantastic. Here these prisoners dancing with spears, and I'm in the middle of them. I fear we're almost out. In fact, we are out. It's 10:16, so we're supposed to finish at 10:15. If there's one more question, I suppose we could take it. But otherwise, we're here. We're not disappearing. We're happy to talk to you in the break. Yes.
Question for Marguerite. Marguerite, you talked about time patterns. You talked about your day job, and I wonder what you think about the balance between, you want your groups to have coherence and cohesion and to be good, choral groups. But then what we're also hearing here about collisions, really, with other kinds of groups. And I wonder, how do you balance those two things as a choral conductor? The pursuit of excellence in your church or in your groups, and then this, this woollier idea that you've been talking about of more inclusive singing.
That's tough. That's so tough. I have no idea if this is making me audible. My sort of off-the-cuff reaction to that is that in the academy, it's very difficult to do that. In the academy, however, it is possible to partner with other ensembles, whether it's Joyful Noise singing with the Harvard Collegium in New Jersey and at Harvard, that there are ways of doing that which expose our students to other ways of making music, and I hope encourages them to go out and do something similar. Through no efforts of my own, completely on her own before she came to Yale, one of our students was instrumental in starting a homeless choir. It's had nothing to do with anything that we did, and she, in fact, informed us when she came here in terms of our work with people, so that it works really both ways. We hope the students catch some of this and can do better perhaps than we have in colleges and schools of making those two worlds come together. So how's that for a really fuzzy answer to your question?
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank our panel, Stephen Demarest, Maggie Brooks, Suzanne Carolici. Thank you very much.